How many of you guys have ever wanted to know more about God or the supernatural world or different things like that? Yeah? Maybe? Okay. All right. Well, we're going to do something. You've got Bibles on the end here. I want you all to have a Bible. So go ahead and grab one of those and pass them along. Make sure everybody gets one.
Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
One more. Thank you, Sad.
No, we need one more.
All right, we've got a cool thing going on. Christmas season's upon us, and we're celebrating something pretty cool that happened at Christmas time. Here's kind of our first quiz question. What did the angel tell Mary to call her baby? Okay, what was the Aramaic word or the Hebrew word?
Yeshua.
No, close.
Yeshua. I don't know how to pronounce it, but
There's another one besides Yeshua, which is Jesus or Joshua. So the angel comes to Mary and says, "You shall name him Emmanuel." What does Emmanuel mean?
God with us.
God is with us. Okay. All right. But what if I told you the Bible says that there's other gods besides the God of creation and the Jewish God? You hear that?
You're fine.
What if I told you the Bible says there's other gods besides the Creator? Besides Jesus and God? Alright? Okay. You may not, you're like, what? Which is what I want you guys to think about. Okay, I want you to open your Bibles to Psalm 82. Now, when's the last time you guys read Psalm 82? Anybody this week? No? Maybe the last 2 months, Psalm 82. In the last year? Maybe? Okay. Ever in your life, you ever remember reading Psalm 82? Okay, one or two of you. All right. Psalm 82 is an interesting psalm, and we're going to find out why. Doug volunteer wants to read it. Any volunteers who would love to read? Yes, go for it.
God presides over heaven's court. He pronounces judgment on the heavenly beings. How long will you hand down unjust decisions by favoring the wicked? Give justice to the poor and the orphan. Uphold the rights of the oppressed and destitute. Rescue the poor and the helpless. Deliver them from the grasp of evil people. But these oppressors know nothing. They are so ignorant. They wander about the darkness, while the whole world is shaken to the core. I say, you are gods. You are the children of the Most High. But you will die like mere mortals, and fall like every other ruler. Rise up, O God, and judge the earth, for all the nations belong to you.
All right. Is there anything in those verses that stands out to you as odd or kind of weird? Yes, sir.
it's God's.
Okay. Okay. So they're called gods, the sons of the Most High. Okay. One place. Was that anything else? Okay.
That's right. You are gods.
Okay. Yeah. Something I found is when you're reading the Bible, if you really want to understand some of the depth of what it's saying, you have to get to the original language. You have to get to the Hebrew. If it's the Old Testament, the Aramaic, if it's the New Testament, the Greek and the New Testament, it can really help you understand the meanings of words. Okay? And so I've done this work for you guys a little bit. There's a Bible scholar named Michael Heiser who I'm indebted to. And yes, you can each have one of these. I put this together for you guys to take home. And on page 3, this is the Hebrew, this isn't all the Hebrew, but this has some of the Hebrew in it that helps clarify what's going on in Psalm 82. Now, has anybody heard the word Elohim? Okay. What is Elohim? We're going to get into what this word is and what it means. Okay, so on page 3, and I'm going to read this out. So, God, or in Hebrew, Elohim, stands in the divine council, or literally in Hebrew it says the council of El. Among the gods, or the Elohim, he pronounces judgment. So this is the first question is, Elohim stands in the midst of the Elohim and declares judgment. Interesting. So he pronounces judgment and says, how long will you judge unjustly, showing favor to the wicked? Judge the wretched and the orphan, vindicate the lowly and the poor. This is from the ESV, English Standard Version. Rescue the wretched and needy, save them from the hands of the wicked. They neither know nor understand, nor they go about in darkness, all the foundations of the earth totter. I said, you are gods, or you are Elohim, sons of the Most High. And the word here is Bene Elyon. All of you. So he's talking to a plural group. But you shall die as men do, and fall like any prince. Arise, O God, judge the earth. So the command is singular. It's talking to one being. For you shall inherit all the nations. Okay? So this may seem kind of confusing, but when we get into this psalm, Jesus actually quotes this psalm in John chapter 10. And he quotes it to show the religious people of his day that he was actually God. And he's actually claiming to be the God of this council. He's claiming to be the judge over supernatural beings. Okay? So, but to understand this, we have to understand the word Elohim. Now, Psalm 82, if you read Psalm 89, there's this council of Elohim, and they're in the heavens. And some people have said, oh, these are probably judges of Israel or men. But Israel never judged the other nations. And in Deuteronomy 32, it says God divided the nations and set sons of God, or these Bene Elohim, over the nations to rule over them and judge them. And so in Psalm 82, God is judging these supernatural beings that are referred to as Elohim and saying, you haven't judged well. Like, you haven't taken care of the poor, you haven't vindicated the righteous, you haven't led the people, you haven't done justice. And that's messing up the world. Therefore, I'm going to judge you. Okay? But what's really interesting at the end, so who's the speaker in this? Who's talking? Who's judging these beings? These Elohim? Jesus, or we could say God. Okay? So it says in the beginning, God stands in this divine council, or this group of supernatural beings. Okay? But then you could say God says, arise, O God. So is God talking to himself? So if God is speaking, he says, arise, O God. Judge the earth, for you shall inherit the nations. Now this is going to sound kind of odd, but this actually happens a lot in the Old Testament. We'll talk about this more. Okay, so I'm hoping this is raising a lot of questions for you, because we're going to find out more about this. Daniel actually quotes this in Daniel 7. There's a scene in heaven that Daniel gets to see where the Son of Man, Jesus, comes before God and receives the nations. And in Daniel, that same phrase, basically, you shall inherit the nations, comes up. So it's pretty sure that this is God, the Father, talking to God, the Son of Jesus, and saying, arise, take up the nations, I'm giving them to you, in Psalm 82 here. Which is why Jesus quotes it in John 10. It's pretty cool. All right, we're going to visit this again, but this word Elohim, So when I say the word God, what do you guys think of? Okay, the Father, part of the Godhead. What do you think of when you hear someone say, when they're in a Christian context referring to God? So God is good. He's powerful. Okay, he can see everything. Okay, those are attributes of God. Those are things that make him unique, special. So usually when we hear the word Elohim, that's what we kind of think Elohim, oh, that's God, right? Okay? But actually, Elohim shows up several other places referring to other beings in the Old Testament. Turn to page 4. What is an Elohim? So just turn the page over. Do you guys know that Elohim is used to describe the gods of the nations in 1 Kings? It's described the gods of Yahweh's council in Psalm 82 and some other places. It's used to describe demons in Deuteronomy. It's used to describe deceased human dead in 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel is kind of an interesting passage. Saul, he's killed all the witches in his land. This is the first king of Israel, Saul. And he's kind of getting desperate. His enemies around him. He's like, Samuel's dead. I've got to speak to Samuel. I need some godly counsel. He goes to the witch of Endor. And this is a witch who's kind of outside the bounds of Israel. And he's known for killing witches. So he disguises himself. He goes to this witch and he says, I need you to call somebody up from the dead. And the witch is like, okay, that's kind of what I do. And so she does her incantations and stuff, and boom, this being appears. And she freaks out because this is not something that usually happens. And he says, what do you see? What do you see? And she says, there's an Elohim coming out of the ground. It's a spirit, it's someone of the supernatural realm. And we find out this is Samuel, deceased. God especially brings Samuel back to talk to Saul and to prophesy essentially his doom. Not good news. Also, it's used of angels in Genesis, and it's used of the God, the creator of Israel. Okay? All these are called Elohim. Okay? So you see a little graph over here? So Elohim, you have God as the center. So Elohim can't be about attributes, because God and demons aren't the same, right? No. And we know from Christianity, from teachings from the Bible, that there's one God. There's not many, many different gods that are all the same God. We're not talking about pantheism, essentially, like the Greek gods. The Greeks taught, okay? So Elohim, it's actually a word that doesn't refer to attributes. It refers to residence. Okay? So if you live in America, what are you?
American.
An American. You know, no matter where you come from, if you're in the country and you declare a citizenship, you're an American. Okay? Doesn't matter where you came from. So it's a term of residence. So if you asked a Jewish person, what's an Elohim? Who is Yahweh? Is he an Elohim? They would say Yahweh is an Elohim, but no other Elohim is Yahweh. Yahweh is special. He's the creator of all the other Elohim. He is what we almost say species unique. Like humans are special among all creation. We're unique. Okay? So God is unique. Okay, so since the Jews, when they used the word Elohim, they weren't talking about attributes. They weren't denying monotheism, one God's creator. But this term is also used of supernatural beings, we know, and other beings. And so this sonship, the sons of God, the B'nai Elohim, is actually rightly applied to supernatural beings. And that's what Jesus is talking about in John 10. Okay? So it doesn't threaten monotheism. Okay? So Elohim, it's like the word sheep. So if we're in a conversation and I say sheep, am I talking about one sheep or lots of sheep?
Either way.
Either way, what do you need to know if I'm talking about one sheep? Context, yes. The rest of the sentence, okay? So the same thing with Elohim.
Subject and predicate.
Yeah, all that stuff. So what we did with Psalm 82 was we looked at the Hebrew and broke down, okay, this is a singular Elohim, God, singular, Elohim, stands in the midst of the Elohim. Because God can't stand in the midst of himself. And you don't want this to be the Trinity or the Godhead because he judges them. That means God is judging himself. Okay? So, that's why Psalm 82 is kind of tricky, but it's really a key to some cool stuff in the supernatural world. All right. So, some questions. How much do you really believe what you believe, and do you know why you believe it? Here's another question. Has science kind of done away with God in the supernatural world? Like, hasn't science kind of disproven God, killed him? And, I mean, people in the 60s and 70s were like, science has killed God, you know? So what about that? What is the supernatural scientific at all? You know, is there any science to support that? Are there interdimensional beings? You know, a lot of people are like, ooh, there's aliens out there, other life forms. Are these spiritual beings, supernatural beings, or are they just physical beings? Are you being lied to about who you are and what your world is really about? Because there's people telling you one message about your world, and the Bible has a pretty different message. Okay? So, here's a quick kind of survey for you guys. How many of you guys believe in angels? Yeah. Okay. How many of you believe in demons or fallen angels? Okay. How many of you believe in sons of God? Watchers? Or B'nai Elohim? Okay. Maybe a few more. Interesting. How many of you believe in aliens, ETs, or UFOs? That they could possibly exist? It's okay. Yeah, a few. Okay. So that's kind of your level of belief in a supernatural world. And we're going to explore some of those things in the next 3 weeks. So what we want to look at is, what's our culture like? Do you understand how others think? How many of you think you pretty much understand what you believe and why you believe it? Okay? Somewhat? Good. If you don't, that's okay. That means you're humble. If you completely understand everything, which I don't. And on this, guys, I'm an explorer. I don't have degrees in this stuff. I just love exploring this stuff because it's about God and his world. And so I'm going to pass on this stuff that I'm exploring. Yes, good.
Do you have an original copy? Is there a PDF of the Hebrew Bible online to download?
Yeah, actually, in here, I have websites you guys can visit. On top of page 7.
Can I download in PDF then?
Possibly. I know there's online Bibles. This is a list of different online Bibles that will give you access to the Hebrew. Okay? So BibleHub.com, Bible Gateway, and BlueLetterBible.org. Those are all great places if you're like, what is the Hebrew of this verse? They'll give you all the Hebrew and then the English above it. That's kind of fun. And if you like being geeky, it's really geeky. Okay. So I want you guys we're going to break up into groups of 3 or 4. And I'm going to give you some pens and paper. This is your first question. What are the top 3 things that influence you? The top 3 things that influence you. And then the second question, the second list of 3 I want you to make is, what are the top 3 things that you think influence American culture or American kids? Because you might be kind of different from what you see as American culture. So what are the top 3 things that influence you?
You want paper separate from the book?
Yeah. And I've got some over here.
Okay.
So we're going to make sure at least one of you has a pen. So stay in your seating areas. You can kind of gather up. Let's do like 4 here. Yes. You will. You will. You're going to get groups of 3. I have way more material stuff in this book that we can cover tonight. So you guys are going to have lots of fun.
Getting groups of 3 or 4.
Okay. I'm just gonna leave this running. Like, you're gonna come
You guys are group over here? And you guys are group right here?
Okay, so for you, personally, what are the top 3 things that influence if you're like, what does he mean? Raise your hand. I can come give you some ideas. But you guys are smart enough to understand. Some of you guys have stuff that influence you in your pockets. Your phone. I would have to say that. Video.
I got that's probably.
I feel like the government, like, and then like,
Come on.
oh.
There's also a place in your book to write things in.
Okay, American culture and government. They're out to get us.
Don't be dumb. Dumb. D-U-M.
So you do parent or do example parents. Swag. It's just killing me. Okay. How many of you guys have at least 3 things? Okay. Alright, so I'm going to ask a couple different groups some of their top things that they see as things that influence them, and then maybe their culture. So, group over here, what were 2 of the top things that influence you?
Authority and media.
Okay, what do you mean by higher authority?
Like people that you look up to or parents.
Parents? Okay, good. Let's group over here, what were 2 of the top 2s? Okay, good. Alright, 2 group back here.
And Jimmy.
Yeah.
We said money, the government, and media.
Okay. Money, government, and media. Interesting. What about you ladies?
We said like technology, media and stuff, and like other people.
Okay, good. Alright. Anybody have anything different from what's been said? You said parents? Parents? Okay. Alright, good. So, are the things that influence you very different from things that influence the rest of the culture, you think? Okay. So, what I read from a survey was movies are hugely influential. You guys said media, which is a big area. What about television? Okay. Internet. And that's all in media. Okay. Good. Then yeah, parents, church, possibly teachers and friends. Okay. You guys mentioned educators like teachers. Okay. So this leads to the second question. What kind of culture do you think we live in?
Fallen culture.
Okay. All right, so in your education, and we're going to think about this as far as supernatural and then kind of natural, science or the natural world, things like that. So in your education, what do you guys get taught? What do you learn?
Math.
Evolution.
Math, science, maybe some evolution, history. How many of you guys learn about angels or demons? No? A little bit?
Did you get
Cool, okay. How many of you guys learn about, well, some have like Salem witch trials. Oh, you might learn about some stuff, some history. Okay. How many of you guys have a course in the supernatural world in your school? Okay. You might have some electors and some stuff. Okay. Yeah.
Sounds like Hogwarts.
Yeah. Okay. So, but what about our movies? How many movies are about supernatural things?
Lots.
A lot. Yeah, probably almost half of the movies that came out last year have something to do with either science fiction or ghosts or aliens or vampires or different things like that. So what would we call our culture? Especially if you get into college. They're going to teach you mostly in your sciences. Are they going to teach you anything about the supernatural world in your sciences?
No.
No. Okay. So there's a blank in your book on page 5. I would argue that we live in an atheistic or a materialistic. Does anybody know what materialism is? Yes. What's materialism?
It's when you're focused on material things.
Okay, somewhat. It doesn't mean you have a lot of stuff, like bling. You're not P. Diddy and you're a materialist, necessarily. Because some of those people with a lot of material things are actually very supernaturalists. We'll talk a little bit about that. A materialist is someone who believes nothing supernatural exists. Only the material world. So if I can't see it, touch it, taste it, or use my mind to grasp it, I'm a materialist. I put my mind is the highest authority in my world, okay? So usually that's a materialist. Most often atheists or evolutionists are materialists. Not all of them, but most of the time, okay? So I would say we live in an atheistic, but yet a superstitious culture. Because in our education, we're atheistic, we're materialists. But in our movies, our entertainment, our video games, we're supernaturalists. We're maybe even more superstitious than the medieval people of medieval days, or the Egyptians or the Greeks. Have you ever thought about that? That we may be more superstitious than what they were? We're like, okay, well, those they don't really exist, but let's play games with them. Let's read books about this stuff. Let's watch movies about this stuff. Because we think maybe it could be real. Just maybe. Or we kind of want it to be real because the world's really boring if it's just a materialistic world. Really? Like, how many cool things can you do with science and a test tube? Some cool stuff if you're into that. Okay. So, here's your last group project.
Can you fill in those other blanks?
Yes. I have to double check my blanks. So, for how would you define the world we live in? It's an atheistic, materialistic, superstitious culture. Or you call it a supernatural culture. Okay? So though we're schooled in evolution or atheism, that's the next one, to believe only in the material world, we dream and play in the supernatural. That's the rest of that sentence.
Thank you.
For those of you who love to fill in the blanks.
I'm one of those guys.
Yes. Okay, so as your groups again, maybe on the back side of your paper, here's the question. What TV shows, music, musicians, movies, video games, and books focus on the supernatural world? That could be ghosts, demons, vampires, magic, creatures, monsters, ETs, aliens, science fiction. So let's try to make a list in our groups. So what movies do you know of, or books, or even video games that focus on the supernatural?
That's the horror movie.
Where is zombie? Where is zombie?
I'm not writing any of this down.
Oh, that was